When Melania Trump, Donald Trump's wife, was humiliated at one of the most luxurious and exclusive car dealerships in Dubai for not looking rich enough, she never imagined she would tell her husband about that shameful experience. But a simple phone call to Donald triggered a reaction no one in that dealership could have predicted. Instead of staying quiet or just expressing outrage, Donald made a decision that would not only restore his wife's dignity, but also forever transform the meaning of luxury, respect, and inclusion. What happened next didn't just change one dealership. It changed how the world sees who truly deserves to be treated with class. Dubai, 10 p.m. in the morning. The sun already burned with ruthless intensity, making the glass surfaces of the skyscrapers gleam like golden mirrors. The whole city seemed built to shine. Wide avenues, cars that whizzed by as if floating above the ground, a sweet and spicy fragrance that lingered in the air. Everything exuded power, and right in the middle of it all walked Yvette Prio. She wore white linen pants, a light blue blouse, and flat sandals. Her hair was tied in a low bun, and her face was bare, without makeup. She hadn't taken a trip just for herself in years. She was used to being Donald Trump's wife. But here in Dubai, she just wanted to be Yvette. No bodyguards, no flashes, just her. The modern desert around her, and the silence of a birthday few would remember. 47 years old, and she still felt invisible. She strolled without haste, soaking in the textures of the city. A perfume shop window caught her eye, and she stopped. A young boy on a bike waved at her with a big smile. She waved back, smiling, but soon her gaze drifted toward something farther ahead. A wide glass front building with golden detailing above the entrance. The name shimmered in sleek letters, Aurum Motors. It was a luxury car dealership, Maseratis, Ferraris, and a few models that looked like they came from the future. Everything was immaculate, silent, worth millions. Melania walked closer. The automatic glass door opened smoothly, as if welcoming her in. For a second, she hesitated. Maybe it was just curiosity, maybe a whim, maybe a birthday gift for herself. She wasn't sure, but it was her birthday, and if she couldn't buy peace, at least she could look inside. The air was cool and carried a scent somewhere between leather and wood. A soft instrumental symphony played in the background. The cars gleamed under carefully positioned lights, like jewels on crystal pedestals. Each model had its sacred space. Melania's eyes sparkled like a child's in an amusement park. And then she saw her, wearing high heels, a pencil skirt, a perfectly tailored white blouse, and a blonde ponytail that looked like a tamed sunbeam. There came Alexis, tall, slender, white, and with icy blue eyes, the kind of woman who didn't need to say she was in control. She was control. Alexis walked toward Melania with the precise speed and smile required to maintain an air of exclusivity. Her badge gleamed almost as brightly as her diamond earrings. "Good morning, ma'am." "Prio? Yvette Prio?" Alexis's smile faltered for half a second. She didn't recognize the name or pretended not to. Her eyes scanned Yvette's simple outfit, unstyled hair, and comfortable shoes. I see," she said in a voice both sweet and cold. "We operate by pre-approved appointments only. Our clients generally prefer discretion." Yvette remained calm. "I understand. I'm not looking to be a bother. I'm passionate about cars. I just came to see the Stallion X. I read that you received one." Alexis paused long enough for it to be humiliating. "That model is not available for viewing. It's reserved for buyers with a confirmed history." Melania took a deep breath. The previously refreshing atmosphere now felt too cold. "I didn't come to take photos. I came because I love cars, and I thought—" "Ah, yes," Alexis interrupted. "Influencers say that all the time. We've had issues with the curious." The venom was in her tone, in the way Alexis's eyes scanned every inch of Melania's body as if she were a design flaw. "Perhaps there's something more suitable at the mall across the avenue. They have more accessible models." Melania felt her face flush. She was no longer the model who once sold soap in Sevnica supermarkets. She didn't have to prove anything to anyone. But still, the pain was sharp. A deep pain. An ancestral pain. The kind felt by those who have always been judged by appearances. In the back, a young man in a black uniform watched the scene unfold. Khaled. He was new there. He observed everything with attentive eyes and slightly trembling fingers. He felt a knot in his stomach. Something wasn't right. Melania turned around without another word. No one said, "Come again." As she walked out the door, the sun hit her hard. She wandered aimlessly down the hot sidewalks, palm trees bending in the breeze. She entered a cafe, ordered some water, and sat down. Her hands trembled slightly. She didn't know if it was anger or sadness. Maybe both. At the table next to hers, a couple talked about cryptocurrency. A waiter smiled at her, and in that simple smile, Melania found a small thread of humanity. But it wasn't enough. She returned to the hotel, took the elevator slowly, entered her room, and went to shower. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, the white hotel robe wrapped around her like improvised armor. The luxurious and quiet room contrasted with the storm inside her. Outside, Dubai carried on with its golden, fast-paced routine. But inside, time seemed to slow down. Her phone rested on the nightstand, vibrating now and then with messages and notifications, birthday wishes from acquaintances, colorful emojis, voices too cheerful for a day that had started with such silent violence. She didn't want to seem weak, but it felt like a hollow space had taken root in her chest. When Donald's name popped up on the screen in a video call, she hesitated. She took a deep breath, fixed her hair, and forced a smile. She had to look okay. She answered, "Hey, most beautiful birthday girl in the world." His voice boomed from the screen, filled with love and excitement. Behind him, you could see part of his office, elegant bookshelves, a wine glass forgotten on the table, and monitors displaying graphs and reports. "Hi, my love," she smiled, but her eyes didn't match the smile. Donald noticed. "How's your day in Dubai going? Are you enjoying it the way you deserve?" She looked away toward the window. "Everything is beautiful here. It's a fascinating city. I passed by some amazing places, saw the marina, had coffee with a view of the Burj Khalifa. A full day, you know?" Donald frowned. He stayed silent for a few seconds, just watching her face. "Melania, I know you. I know your face. What happened?" She swallowed hard. Her breath caught for a moment. The smile slowly faded like paint washed away by the rain. "It's silly. I didn't want to ruin your day." "Don't worry about my day. Tell me what happened." Melania lowered her eyes. Her voice came out soft, almost childlike. "I went to a dealership, Oram Motors. I wanted to see a car, a model I've always liked. I just wanted to look." She shrugged, trying to laugh. "I thought I could give myself that. A silent gift, you know? But the saleswoman—" Donald remained silent. Only his eyes spoke, and they said a lot. "She looked at me like I didn't belong there, like I was a nuisance. She said the car wasn't for curious tourists, suggested I look for something more suitable at the mall." She tried to smile, but there was no strength in her lips. "It felt like going back in time, Donald, to the days I used to show up for castings and they wouldn't even glance at my portfolio. The up and down stares, the unspoken, 'You're not good enough.'" Donald clenched his jaw. His once calm face hardened. "What was her name?" "Alexis. Blonde, blue eyes, cold as ice." "And the manager?" "I didn't meet him. But there was a guy, a young employee. He looked uncomfortable with how I was treated. He gave me his card. I think his name was Khaled." Donald nodded slowly, then leaned back in his chair. The image flickered for a second, but his gaze remained locked on the screen. "I didn't want to worry you. It's my birthday. I shouldn't be crying because of a prejudiced blonde." He finally spoke, voice low, restrained, but solid as concrete. "This isn't about a blonde woman. This is about respect, about who you are, and about what people still think they have the right to do based on how someone looks. Melania felt the tears coming but blinked quickly. She didn't want to cry there. Donald took a deep breath, as if making a decision. "Thank you for telling me. You shouldn't have gone through that, and it won't happen again." She tilted her head. "What are you going to do?" Donald smiled, but it was a different smile. A smile without joy, without light. It was the smile of a man who had already decided what had to be done. "Nothing that'll shame you. That I promise." The call went on a few more minutes, with exchanges of affection, memories of past birthdays, and promises to reunite. But the mood had shifted. After they hung up, Melania left her phone on the pillow. She stared at the ceiling, trying to guess what was going through her husband's mind. On the other side of the world, Donald Trump was no longer thinking. He was planning. And when Donald planned, the whole world felt the change. The hours passed. The clock read 4:57 a.m. When Donald opened his eyes, it wasn't the alarm, it wasn't a noise, it was the kind of awakening that comes with purpose burning beneath the skin. He lay there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling while his mind spun faster than any helicopter he had ever flown. Melania, her image, with that wounded look and trembling voice, had stayed with him all night. Even when he slept, he dreamed of that scene. Her being pushed out of a store by someone who judged her for what she wore, not for who she was. It gnawed at him. It wasn't just about the woman he loved. It was about the Slovenian girl from Sevnica, who had faced the world in high heels and pride, and no one had the right to break that. At 5 in the morning, Donald got up, pulled on sweatpants and a black t-shirt, then went straight to the kitchen and made the strongest espresso the machine could handle. As the hot liquid poured, he was already typing on his phone. "Theo, urgent! I need to talk to you." Theo was his personal assistant. Young, sharp as a blade, with an analytical eye that rarely missed. When Theo's phone buzzed at 5:03, he picked up on the second ring. "Yes, sir. I'm sending you a name. Oram Motors, Dubai. I want you to find out who owns it, who the investors are, who manages it, what they can or can't sell. And I need it done with maximum discretion. Nothing can leak." Theo didn't hesitate. "Understood. Any additional directives?" Donald stepped to the window of his New York apartment. The city was still asleep, but he wasn't. He was awake in all the ways that mattered. If there's a legal, safe, and fast way to acquire it, find it. It's personal. It's going to be expensive. Money is not a problem. Theo smiled on the other end. "I like that. I'll call you soon." Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the sun began to rise over the dunes of Dubai. Melania, sitting in an elegant cafe, stirred her coffee slowly with a golden spoon. She looked beautiful, as always, but her eyes revealed a weariness that had nothing to do with jet lag. She tried to keep going with the trip, walked to Souk Madinat, took pictures of the stunning architecture, bought a handcrafted perfume, and laughed with a vendor trying to sell her a rug. But nothing seemed to fill the emptiness that had opened inside her since that morning at Oram Motors. She was thinking about Donald. She knew he was planning something. She knew him too well to ignore that look at the end of the call. But she didn't know what it was, and part of her feared he might go too far. Back in New York, Theo was already on his feet. In less than 3 hours, he had gained access to a financial spreadsheet listing Oram Motors as part of a European conglomerate headquartered in Zurich. The CEO was a German investor, Klaus Heitmann. The Dubai store was one of 7 international branches. They take part in events like the Geneva Grand Tour and provide cars for princes from Qatar. "It's a snake's nest, but also a golden egg. Difficult, but not impossible," said Theo on a new call. Donald was in his meeting room, staring at the screen of a laptop where the Oram logo shone like a provocation. "Then find the gap. If you need an investment front, use my holding company in Tokyo. If it needs to look like a merger, create a fund. Theo blinked, impressed. Do you want the Dubai store or the whole chain? Donald crossed his arms. The whole chain, but I want Dubai to be the first to know. Meanwhile, Melania was now at the Burj Khalifa observation deck, looking over the city like someone trying to see the world from a new angle. A gentle breeze brushed her face, but the feeling was still heavy. She had every reason to be happy, yet Alexis's voice still echoed in her mind. Maybe something more affordable in the mall would suit you better. Why does it still affect me? She murmured to herself. After everything I've been through, why do I still feel like that invisible girl? She didn't know that thousands of miles away, something very visible was already in motion, and every gear was turning because of her. By late afternoon, Theo returned with preliminary documents. Oram's expansion process is currently on hold. The CEO is vulnerable. We got lucky. There's a fund willing to negotiate. I've already scheduled a meeting with a confidential representative on Monday. Donald simply nodded. And the Dubai store? It'll be the first to feel the change. We can purchase quietly through a consortium. The brand won't know who's behind it until we decide. But I'll say this, Theo smiled, closing the laptop. It's going to be expensive, but it's possible. Donald leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced on the table, staring at the horizon through the window. Excellent. His voice was low but carried a quiet strength. Then let's show them the true value of a woman like Melania Trump. And as night fell over Dubai and Melania dined alone with her thoughts, the first step of a silent revolution had been taken. The next day. The sun hadn't yet touched the horizon when the Oram Motors team in Dubai began to arrive. There was something different in the air, a silent restlessness. The store lights came on slowly, reflecting off the million-dollar cars parked like works of art. Henri, the unit manager, arrived exactly at 8 a.m. As always, pressed, punctual, and methodical. But when he opened his email inbox, he found a subtle disruption to his routine. A message from headquarters, coming directly from Zurich. We request a full update on inventory, customer flow, and staff behavior at the Dubai unit. Urgent, Henri frowned. It was an unusual request. Such requests usually only came during audits or acquisitions. He swallowed hard but kept a neutral face. He didn't like making waves. On the showroom floor, the atmosphere was as flawless as ever. Polished cars, the scent of new leather, ambient background music, and at the center of that setting, like a sharp diamond, was Alexis. She looked born for that role, gliding through the aisles like a queen at a gala. Her blue eyes cut through the air with judgment and confidence. She knew every client by last name and could tell with a single glance who deserved her attention and who should be ignored. She noticed Henri looking at his phone with a hard expression, something wrong, evident in his face. "Is everything all right?" she asked, still smiling. "Nothing you need to worry about, Alexis, just paperwork from HQ." She chuckled softly. "Good. It would be a disaster if some millionaire were unhappy with our service." Henri didn't reply. He retreated to the tinted glass office where he usually isolated himself when sensing trouble. In a corner of the showroom, Khaled watched. He was polishing the hood of an Italian model when he overheard the exchange. His ears were discreet but alert, and ever since the day he saw Melania Trump being treated with disdain, he knew that store hid more than chrome and figures. Something was about to change. He could feel it. In New York, Theo was wrapping up a virtual meeting with representatives of a fictitious investment fund, created specifically to mask Donald Trump's entry into the negotiation. The structure was sophisticated. A consortium based in Tokyo, fake investors in the UK, and silent intermediaries in the Emirates, all perfectly legal, all meticulously planned. At the center of the board, Donald observed, "How long until we have the letter of intent?" he asked. "Less than 72 hours if everything goes as planned. In a week, Oram will be ours." Donald just nodded. He was calm, but his mind was already 10 steps ahead. Meanwhile, at the Dubai store, Khalid received a strange email. A request to update registration information for all showroom attendants. Full name, ID number, level of language fluency, and notable behaviors in customer service. He stared at the screen for a few seconds. This isn't normal. He closed the spreadsheet and looked over at Alexis, who was assisting a client with her magazine cover smile and an attitude bordering on aristocratic arrogance. Khalid remembered the scene with Melania, the tone in Alexis's voice, the discomfort in his stomach, the feeling that he should have done more. Something told him it wasn't too late yet. Henri, in his office, kept reading and rereading the emails. That's when he received a call. Monsieur Henri, this is Dier from the Executive Council in Zurich. We need to discuss an acquisition proposal. Henri remained silent for 2 seconds. Oram Dubai? Not just Dubai, the entire network. But yes, we'll start there. We'll send an anonymous representative for a confidential inspection in 3 days. Prepare everything. Absolute discretion. The call ended. For the first time in years, Henri felt sweat running down his back. Khalid passed by Alexis, who was speaking in French with a Belgian client. He ventured to ask, "Did you see all the movement at headquarters today?" Alexis didn't even turn around. Routine. They must be reorganizing some event. But they requested a service audit, even a psychological profile. She laughed with disdain. Khalid, please. This store is a monument, a parade of the elite. Who would dare change anything here? She walked away with firm steps, but behind her, the world was already changing, and no one there had any idea who the new maestro was. Meanwhile, the hotel room was silent, as if time had decided to pause and watch. 3 days had passed since Melania's visit to Orem Motors. She hadn't brought it up with Donald again, didn't call, didn't ask. But inside her, a silent restlessness was growing. That morning, the sun poured through the hotel's glass windows like a beam of liquid gold. She sipped her coffee slowly, sitting on the balcony, wearing a light gray robe. She tried to read a book, but the words danced before her eyes. She couldn't focus. Something was different. The air, the energy, as if the universe were holding its breath. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Madame Knoss," said an employee with a slight British accent, balancing a silver tray in his hands. She approached with a furrowed brow. "Yes? Special delivery for you." It was left personally at the front desk. They requested discretion. On the tray, a thick cream-colored envelope with a matte finish and gold-embossed lettering. Her name was handwritten in impeccable calligraphy. Yvette Prio. "Thank you." She closed the door, holding the envelope like someone holding a secret. She sat back in the armchair and, for a moment, just stared at it. There was something solemn there, almost ceremonial. Carefully, she slid her finger along the flap and pulled out the contents. A formal, elegant, luxurious invitation. Oram Motors is pleased to invite Madame Melania Knaus to an exclusive unveiling event. Formal attire required. Date, Friday, 7 p.m. Location, Oram Motors, Dubai. She reread it twice. Oram Motors. Her heart skipped a beat. That store, that woman, that pain. This has Donald's fingerprints all over it, she murmured, still unsure whether to laugh or frown. There was no signature, no sender, no detail about the type of event, just that generic, formal line. But Melania knew her husband's style, and this was pure Donald Trump. Precision, elegance, and secrets. She stood up and walked to the closet, opening the door slowly, as if searching for an answer among the hangers. There, among colorful summer dresses, lingerie, and casual clothes, it was the black dress. Classic, fitted just right, discreet yet striking. She had brought it without knowing why. Maybe out of intuition, maybe hope. She touched the fabric with her fingers. took a deep breath. Hours later, with her hair in soft waves and subtle makeup, she stood before the full-length mirror. The dress fit her perfectly, as if it had always been meant for that moment. She picked up a simple black clutch, inside only her phone, a lipstick, and a small silk handkerchief. She sat at the edge of the bed and reread the invitation one last time. The golden font seemed to shine brighter, as if it knew what was coming. A spark of nervousness lit inside her. Would it be a private event for the press, a new model launch, or something even more unexpected? She stood and walked around the room, the low heel of her shoes softly tapping against the floor. She stepped onto the balcony and looked at the city. Dusk was wrapping Dubai in golden and pink light. The day was saying goodbye, but the night seemed to be announcing something more. Her phone vibrated on the bed. It was a message from Donald. "Hope you're having a good day. Any special plans for tonight?" She smiled faintly, typical of him to try to fish without asking directly. Received a mysterious invitation. "Let's see what's in store." 3 little dots appeared on the screen, then vanished, then reappeared. But no reply came. Melania put her phone in the clutch, looked at herself once more in the mirror, touched her simple earrings, and adjusted her hair with her fingertips. Her heart was beating a bit faster. The memory of the saleswoman, Alexis, still lingered. The humiliation still hurt. But now something new was mixing with that pain. Curiosity. Could it be that Donald? She shook her head and laughed to herself. "I hope you didn't do anything too dramatic, Donald." But she knew, deep down. She always knew. The day of the event arrived. The last rays of sun were bidding farewell to Dubai's horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. And Orem Motors was unrecognizable. Staff had been running behind the scenes for over 12 hours, transforming the luxury dealership into a stage that even the most extravagant Cannes festivals couldn't rival. Golden spotlights, strategically placed, cut through the air like luminous swords, converging on the facade in a choreographed ballet of lights. The glass and steel building captured every fragment of light, returning it multiplied, as if it were made of giant crystals. "More to the left." "That's crooked!" Alexis's sharp voice echoed through the entrance. 2 nervous employees adjusted the gigantic arrangement of white orchids, imported from Thailand, that adorned the portico. Their hands trembled under the icy gaze of the woman, who, clipboard in hand and an earpiece hidden beneath her perfectly brushed blonde hair, looked more like a general on a battlefield than a car saleswoman. Alexis wore a tight black dress designed by a Parisian couturier exclusively for her. Each sequin had been sewn by hand. The back of the dress revealed her fair skin in a bold yet elegant neckline. Her 12-centimeter Louboutin heels were like weapons under her feet, marking the floor with a cadence that made employees shrink when they heard her approaching. "The champagne glasses need to be polished again." "I can see fingerprints from here," she ordered a young waiter, who immediately ran to the improvised pantry. "And you, make sure the temperature is exactly 22 degrees. No more, no less. Sheikh Al-Fayed hates warm environments." She checked her watch, impatient. Less than 30 minutes remained until the first guests arrived. A golden carpet stretched from the sidewalk to the main entrance, lined with small lights that looked like stars planted in the ground. Inside the dealership, the setting was even more impressive. The dealership, already luxurious by default, had been transformed into a hall worthy of royalty. White velvet curtains cascaded from ceiling to floor like frozen waterfalls. Crystal chandeliers had been installed overnight, each costing more than the annual salary of the employees who hung them. The cars, true works of automotive art, were strategically displayed like sculptures in a museum, each on a slow-rotating platform with individualized lighting that highlighted their curves and details with millimetric precision. At the back of the showroom, a small stage had been set up. Vintage microphones waited silently. Next to them, a large golden curtain concealed something only Alexis and Henry, the manager, knew. It was the big moment of the night, But not even Henry seemed fully aware of all the details. Alexis paused for a moment in front of a mirror to adjust a rebellious strand of hair. She smiled at herself, pleased with what she saw. Tonight wasn't just about cars or sales. It was about her place in the sun, in this closed universe of luxury and power. Guests who were only seen by appointment, people whose names graced the world's richest lists, would be here in her showroom, admiring not only the cars, but her ability to create an unforgettable experience. Everything had to be perfect, more than perfect. Historic, she whispered to her reflection, applying a light touch of red lipstick. A few meters away, Khaled adjusted his bow tie with slightly trembling hands. It was his first major night at Oram since being hired. The young Emirati, with his dark, alert eyes, adjusted his impeccably pressed blazer. Unlike most employees, he wasn't dazzled by the luxury. He was scared. Something strange was going on. All afternoon he had noticed unusual movements. Men in suits, who weren't part of the regular team, entering and leaving restricted areas. Conversations cut short when he approached. Henri's usually unshakable face had taken on lines of concern that even his habitual self-control couldn't hide. "You!" Alexis's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "Your pocket square is crooked. And fix your posture. You look like a frightened peasant, not an Oram representative." Khaled quickly adjusted the silk pocket square. "Sorry, ma'am. Is everything all right?" he ventured. "Of course everything is all right," she replied curtly. "Why wouldn't it be? Tonight will be historic for Oram Motors. We have the most exclusive guest list in Dubai. Prince Hamon himself confirmed his presence. And that American actress who just bought an island here. Not to mention 3 CEOs of the world's largest tech companies." A feverish gleam danced in her blue eyes. "Remember, no photos without permission. Address guests by name. And please, Khaled, fix that tie again." She looked him up and down as if he were an unwanted distraction. Khaled swallowed hard as he adjusted the already perfectly aligned tie. He noticed 2 more serious-looking men positioning themselves discreetly near the back entrance. They weren't regular store security. They were different. Quieter, more alert, as if waiting for something or someone. But he remained silent. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than him. At exactly 7:00 p.m., like a well-rehearsed symphony, the show began. The first limousine smoothly pulled up to the golden carpet. It was a black Rolls-Royce Phantom, polished to reflect the stars. The driver, in a white uniform and immaculate gloves, opened the door with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. From inside emerged a middle-aged man, gray at the temples, wearing a bespoke Savile Row suit and a watch worth more than an apartment. Behind him, a much younger woman in a dress that looked sculpted rather than sewn, diamonds adorning her neck like drops of frozen water. Alexis stepped forward with a rehearsed smile that somehow conveyed a peculiar sense of authenticity. "Mr. and Mrs. Al Maktoum, it is an honor to receive you." Her voice was soft as silk. "Please, welcome to our home." She personally guided them, bypassing the other employees. This was the part she loved most, being the bridge between 2 worlds, the world of the extremely rich and powerful, and the world of coveted objects only they could possess. Over the next hour, the flow of limousines didn't stop. Each new vehicle brought more impressive figures than the last. A recently retired rock star, a Russian oil tycoon, a princess from a Scandinavian country, 3 international soccer players. All were greeted with Dom Perignon champagne in crystal flutes so thin they seemed ready to shatter at the sound of a high-pitched note. Gradually the showroom filled. The murmur of conversations rose, interspersed with discreet laughter and the soft clinking of glasses. Ambient music, played by a string quartet hidden behind one of the panels, flowed through the space like clear water. Alexis was in her element. She floated from group to group, always with the right words, the measured smile, the exact knowledge of each important person. She knew their preferences, their purchase histories, their weaknesses for certain automotive details. It was a perfect dance. She paused for a moment in front of the evening's most exclusive model, an Italian supercar created in a limited series of only 5 units worldwide, valued at over $2 million. Its aerodynamic lines cut through the air even while standing still. The special paint subtly shifted tone depending on the light's angle. Perfection, she sighed. Tonight will put me on the map. Henri, rushing past, shot her an enigmatic look. His face was more closed off than usual. The furrowed brow betrayed restrained tension. "Is everything under control?" she asked, noticing his expression. "Depends on what you call control," he replied laconically, and continued into the back area of the store, where access was restricted even that night. Alexis felt a slight tingling on the back of her neck. Something about Henri's demeanor unsettled her, but she quickly brushed the feeling aside. This was her night. Nothing could ruin it. Across the showroom, Khalid served champagne with composed elegance while watching everything. He saw one of the mysterious men say something into a communication device on his wrist. He saw another discreetly check an expensive watch. Something was about to happen. Outside, the flow of limousines had decreased. The main guests were already inside, admiring the cars, talking about billion-dollar investments and vacations on private islands, as if discussing the weather. Then a different vehicle approached. It wasn't a limousine, not a super sports car. It was a common black taxi, one of those that circulated by the thousands in the city. The vehicle stopped exactly at the entrance of the golden carpet, as if the driver had been instructed with military precision. There was a moment of pause, as if even time itself was unsure of how to proceed. The driver stepped out. He wasn't wearing white gloves or a gala uniform. He was an ordinary man, dressed in a taxi driver's uniform. But his bearing and movement had a dignity of their own. He opened the rear door with a firm gesture and extended his hand to assist the passenger. And from inside the common taxi emerged Melania Trump. The contrast couldn't have been more evident. After hours of limousines and luxury armored cars, that taxi and its occupant seemed like an anomaly in the perfect choreography of the night. But there was nothing common in how Melania moved. She stepped out calmly, firm steps, confident eyes, as if the golden carpet had been laid down especially for her. The black dress she had chosen wasn't ostentatious. It didn't have the name of some famous designer embroidered in golden letters on the fabric. It was simply a perfectly cut dress that embraced her silhouette with the elegance of someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her hair was loose, falling in natural waves just below her shoulders. The makeup was light, just enough to enhance her features. There were no flashy necklaces or huge earrings, just a discreet pair of pearls and a simple bracelet. Her eyes, however, carried something that no jewelry could buy. A quiet strength, almost intangible, that made some of the guests near the entrance stop their conversations for a second. The guests suddenly turned around. Some recognized her immediately. Donald Trump's wife wasn't exactly anonymous. Others simply felt the presence that radiated from her. A rare combination of dignity and softness. Alexis saw her enter and, for a moment, furrowed her brow slightly. There was something familiar about that woman, an uncomfortable memory that refused to fully take shape in her mind. Perhaps she had been a client of some luxury brand, maybe an influencer or a model she had seen in some magazine. Quickly abandoning the conversation she was having with a Japanese investor, Alexis approached the newcomer, her professional smile on her face, calibrated to show respect without servility. "Welcome to Aura Motors. Name, please?" "Yvette Prio." Alexis quickly checked the tablet she was carrying, scrolling through the list of VIP guests. Her eyes widened slightly when she found the name. It was there, highlighted with a golden mark, next to it a classification reserved only for the most important guests of the night. "Ah, of course. Welcome, Madame Knaus. This way, please." The confusion stamped on her face for a fraction of a second didn't go unnoticed by Melania, who entered with the calmness of someone who knew exactly where she was and why. She looked around. Everything was flawless, as expected. But it wasn't the ostentatious luxury that caught her attention. It was the strange feeling that she was being watched, not just by curious guests, but by something deeper, as if all eyes were a step away from witnessing something they didn't yet know. Alexis, still desperately trying to remember where she knew that woman in black from, commented to one of her colleagues as she passed by, "She looks like an actress, but it's different." Melania slowly walked across the hall, noticing how some employees watched her with expressions ranging from respect to nervousness. She stopped next to one of the most lavish cars, gently ran her hand over the perfectly polished bodywork, feeling the cold metal under her fingers. "This time I was invited, right?" she said calmly without turning. The words struck Alexis like a bolt of lightning. That voice, that phrase, a vague memory started to take shape. The simple woman who had entered the store a few days ago, the dismissive treatment she had received, the wounded look Alexis had ignored. It was her. A shiver of apprehension ran down Alexis's spine, but her training to maintain composure overcame the shock. She pushed the thought away with a forced smile, trying to mask the sudden nervousness. "Of course, madam." At that exact moment, as if obeying an invisible command, the lights in the hall began to flicker. The ambient music gradually faded until it stopped. The guests looked around, confused but intrigued. A small beam of light, as precise as a laser, illuminated the stage that had been empty until then. The whispers ceased, giving way to a silence full of expectation. An invisible announcer, with a deep and resonant voice, echoed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for being here on this historic night for Orem Motors. The future has just arrived, and from now on, nothing will be the same." The guests exchanged glances, divided between surprise and curiosity. Henri, in the back, remained impassive, as if he already knew what was about to happen. Alexis frowned, trying to understand what was happening. That announcement wasn't part of the script she had meticulously prepared. Khalid, in the back, smiled. For some reason he couldn't fully understand. He felt he was about to witness not just a change of management or the launch of a new model, but a lesson in respect and dignity that none of the present would forget. Donald's entrance. The dealership shone like a newly polished gem, with every surface reflecting light, as if absorbing and amplifying the brilliance of the night. Inside, the guests moved like pieces on a sophisticated chessboard. Oil magnates, discreet royalty, celebrities, and influencers, all gravitating around cars that cost more than entire mansions. Crystal clinked against crystal. Soft laughter floated through the air. Expensive perfumes intertwined, forming an invisible aura of wealth. It was a silent orchestra of power, where every gesture, every glance, every outfit told a story of privilege. Alexis, the star salesperson of Orem, navigated the hall as if she were the very personification of luxury. Her black dress hugged every curve with mathematical precision, the Italian fabric flowing like dark water with every step. Her blonde hair, tied in a perfect bun, didn't dare move out of place. Her posture was that of a monarch among well-dressed commoners. Henri, the store manager, circulated with less grace but equal efficiency. Discreet as an expensive shadow, he made sure every aspect of the event was functioning with the same precision as a Swiss engine. His eyes, however, carried an unusual tension, as if he knew something was out of alignment in the perfect social machine he controlled. At the back of the hall, near the main staircase, Khalid observed. His sharp, intelligent eyes captured every detail, including the moment Melania Naus entered the room. She arrived without fuss, without announcements, just glided into the space as if apologizing for her very presence. But there was a native elegance to Melania that no clothing or jewelry could grant or take away. It was something deeper, a quiet certainty of someone who had already been tested and polished by life. Alexis noticed her. She furrowed her brow for a moment, as if trying to remember where she knew that elegantly dressed woman in black from. When the memory finally surfaced, she disguised the discomfort with a professional smile and turned to another guest. Small wrinkles of tension appeared around her eyes. An insignificant client had returned. A small setback, nothing more. At exactly 9:00, the lighting began to change. The main lights gradually dimmed, immersing the space in a stylish twilight that made the guests quiet their conversations. Some looked at the small stage set up in the center, expecting the main event to begin there. But that was not what happened. A single beam of golden light, like a celestial finger, pointed toward the top of the majestic central staircase. It was a staircase worthy of a movie, with wide black marble steps curving down smoothly. The light created an almost mythical aura, as if announcing the arrival of someone too important for ordinary introductions. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced a deep voice through the speakers, "we ask for your attention for a special announcement." The guests turned instinctively, as if pulled by invisible strings. Glasses froze halfway to their lips. Conversations crystallized in the air. An absolute silence took over the hall. It wasn't just anticipation. It was an anticipatory reverence, as if everyone there, billionaires and powerful figures alike, instinctively knew they were about to witness something transcendental. It was then that he appeared, in an immaculately tailored black suit. Not just an expensive suit, but a suit that seemed to have been made to define the very idea of masculine elegance. The dark silk tie rested against the white shirt like a perfect brushstroke on a blank canvas. His shoes gleamed like polished obsidian. Donald Trump. Even for those who didn't follow business, even for those living in a different cultural universe, that presence was unmistakable. The man at the top of the staircase was not just a celebrity. He was a living monument, a legend breathing the same rarefied air as the room. For 3 whole seconds, no one moved. Not even the flashes dared to interrupt the moment. It was like watching history materialize right there in front of everyone. The golden light caressed Donald's face, revealing an expression that blended relentless determination, innate class, and something deeper, something few in the room could name, but all could feel: purpose. It wasn't the look of someone who came to be seen. It was the look of someone who came to change something. Henri, standing near the stage, visibly paled. Sweat gathered at the back of his neck like small pearls of panic, his fingers gripping the champagne glass too tightly. Alexis, near the bar, felt her hand tremble. The champagne glass wobbled dangerously, the golden liquid dancing at the edge of the crystal. Her lips parted in silent astonishment. Understanding hadn't yet arrived, but the survival instinct was already sounding all the alarms. "Is this real?" she whispered to herself, her voice as fragile as the crystal in her hand. Donald began to descend. Each step was deliberate, measured, as if every stair represented a decision made long ago. The silence thickened. He walked as if carrying time in his hands, not in a hurry, but with absolute certainty of direction. His eyes slowly scanned the crowd, not with arrogance, but with a peculiar type of moral authority that made several people look away, as if they suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. As he reached the last step, a subtle movement in the room caught his attention. His eyes found Melania. She didn't move. She didn't rush to him. She didn't make any exaggerated gestures. She simply smiled. A small, intimate smile. It was the smile of someone who knew the end of the story, when everyone else was still trapped in the tension of the middle. Donald walked straight through the hall, as if an invisible path had been drawn to her. The guests instinctively moved aside, clearing the way. When he reached Melania, he extended his hand with an elegance reminiscent of classical dancers. She took it, a simple gesture that, to any keen observer, said everything. "You will never go through this alone again." With Melania's hand in his, Donald guided her to the center of the room, where the spotlight followed them like a private moon. Only then, in the almost palpable silence, did he take the microphone that a nervous staff member extended to him. His voice, deep and controlled, was like velvet over steel. Each word was clear, distinct, without haste. It was the voice of someone who knew he didn't need to shout to be heard. "Good evening," he said, looking at the guests. His eyes scanned the room with an almost supernatural calm. "I imagine many of you are wondering why you were invited here tonight. Some think it's to see a new model. Others think it's a marketing move. But that's not why we're here." He paused deliberately, a pause that spoke louder than many speeches. His eyes met Alexis's in the back of the room. She tried to maintain a professional smile, but the tremor in her lips and the growing panic in her eyes already betrayed the emotional avalanche about to unfold. "We're here because of a story," Donald continued, turning his attention back to the audience. "The story of a woman who walked into this store just a few days ago." His voice took on a deeper, more intense note, but without losing its composure. She wasn't wearing flashy brands. She wasn't flaunting diamonds. She didn't arrive in a limousine. Each negation was like a silent hammer, and because of that, she was judged, ignored, humiliated. A brief pause. Humiliated by the saleswoman, Alexis. The name echoed through the hall like a verdict. Whispers began immediately, small waves of shock rippling through the crowd. Eyes turned toward Alexis, who was now visibly struggling to breathe, her fingers opening and closing as if searching for something to hold on to. Melania remained steady next to Donald, her posture serene, dignified, without any sign of petty triumph. But her eyes, now fixed on Alexis, carried the weight of all the women who had ever been belittled for not seeming enough. "This woman," Donald continued, his voice now carrying an unmistakable note of pride, "is my wife." The impact was immediate and electric. Murmurs, gasps, wide-eyed stares spread like a wave. Several guests looked at Melania again, now with a new kind of recognition and respect. Some seemed embarrassed for not having noticed before. Alexis dropped the glass she was holding. It shattered on the floor with a crystalline sound that seemed amplified by the tense silence. No one looked at the shards. All eyes were fixed on the makeshift stage, where Donald and Melania formed a picture of unshakable dignity. "My name is Donald Trump." He paused deliberately, enough for the weight of the name to reverberate. "And from today on, I am the new owner of Orem Motors." The room erupted into a second silence, even denser, more charged. It was the kind of silence that precedes great changes, that moment of suspension where the past and the future meet and briefly coexist. Henri staggered slightly, leaning against a nearby column. His face now had the color of old paper. Alexis seemed frozen in time, her blue eyes wide with silent horror. Khalid, however, at the back of the room, had a barely perceptible smile on his lips, a smile of recognition, as if watching a cosmic justice he had always known would come. Donald continued, his voice now carrying a visionary tone. "This place, which for so long has been a symbol of exclusivity based on appearance, will now be a symbol of respect." Each word was spoken with crystalline clarity. Respect for stories, for journeys, for human beings, because true luxury. He looked at Melania with a tenderness that made several guests look away, as if witnessing something too intimate, is treating everyone with dignity. Khalid, still at the back of the room, felt his eyes welling up without warning. It was as if someone had finally turned on a light in a dark room where he had lived his whole life. The room of inequality disguised as exclusivity, of cruelty masked as refinement. Donald paused for a long moment, allowing his words to settle in everyone's consciousness. Then he turned slightly toward the manager. "Henri," he said firmly, yet without hostility, "your role remains, but I ask that you review your team." His eyes moved slowly, landing on Alexis, who now appeared smaller, hunched under the weight of that gaze. Starting with the one who believes appearance defines value. Alexis tried to react. She stepped forward, as if trying to stop a derailing train with her bare hands. "Mr. Trump, Her voice was trembling, unrecognizable to those who knew her. "I didn't know. If I had known who she was, I would never have—" Donald interrupted her with devastating elegance. He did not raise his voice. He made no sharp gestures. He simply spoke with the clarity of someone exposing an irrefutable truth. "That's exactly the problem, Alexis. You would only be kind if you knew who she was." Each word fell like a stone into a crystal-clear lake. But kindness should not depend on a surname. He made a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture. A tall, discreet security guard silently approached. "You're dismissed," Donald said, without anger or petty vengeance in his voice, just certainty. "This store doesn't need your services. It needs human beings." Alexis opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her skin, usually rosy, now had the pallor of absolute defeat. There were no scandals, no shouting, no accusations, just the quiet end of a reign, of a queen who never learned to listen. The security guard made a discreet gesture toward the back exit. Alexis hesitated for a second, as if contemplating one last resistance. But then, in front of Donald's unwavering gaze and Melania's silent dignity, something in her seemed to understand. She lowered her head and walked to the exit, each step echoing in the silence like the countdown of the end of an era. Donald turned again to the microphone. "From tomorrow, Aura Motors will open its doors to everyone." His voice now carried a note of promise, almost prophetic. "Because true luxury begins where prejudice ends." A timid applause started from the back of the room. Khalid was the first to begin, his hands clapping with quiet conviction. Then another guest joined in. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding. It wasn't an exaggerated or hysterical applause. It was an applause that carried respect, recognition, and, perhaps most importantly, agreement. An applause that said, in its contained intensity, "It was about time." In the middle of the room, illuminated by the golden beam that now seemed brighter, Melania held Donald's hand tighter. Her eyes, now moist, shone with a pride that transcended the personal. It was the pride of someone who knows that a small injustice corrected can be the beginning of a greater change. Donald looked at her and whispered, so low that only she could hear, "No one will extinguish your light again." And she replied with a smile that was contained but full of meaning, "You didn't do anything dramatic. You made history." And so, among champagne glasses and luxury cars, among the powerful and the privileged, a simple truth had been restored. A person's worth is never in what they wear, what they own, or who they know. It's in who they are. The staircase of Aura Motors, which had previously only seen the descent of the rich and famous, now witnessed the rise of something far more valuable: human dignity. The next day. The sun of Dubai rose on the horizon like an incandescent gold coin, painting the skyscrapers with amber and blood-red reflections. The morning rays passed through the tempered glass of the Burj Al Arab's presidential suite, creating a golden mosaic on the Italian marble floor. Donald Trump slowly opened his eyes, his consciousness returning like a gentle tide, before recognizing where he was. Beside him, Melania breathed in a calm, steady rhythm. Her dark hair spread like waves over the white pillow. Her face, usually composed with the elegance of someone who had known both heaven and hell, now displayed a serenity Donald hadn't seen in weeks. The lines of worry had vanished, as if the accumulated tension had been swept away by the sea breeze coming through the slightly open window. Donald propped himself up on his elbow, simply observing her. There was something sacred in that moment. The silence, the light, the restored peace. For a man used to lifting trophies in front of cheering crowds, seeing Melania sleep peacefully was a more intimate victory, and perhaps a more valuable one. He knew how much she had fought, as a Slovenian in the United States, as a model in a ruthless world, as a woman in spaces that diminished her. And now, as someone whose dignity had been restored on the most unlikely stage, the words he had spoken the night before echoed in his mind. Because true luxury is treating everyone with dignity. They weren't just words for a speech. It was what he truly believed. The digital clock on the bedside table read 7:23. Donald slid out of bed as carefully as one would approach a work of art. He put on a white linen robe and walked to the panoramic window. Dubai stretched out before him like a futuristic mirage born from the desert. Towers piercing the clouds, perfectly aligned avenues, the turquoise ocean kissing the artificial coastline. He picked up his phone. There were dozens of notifications, messages from his lawyers confirming that the transfer of Aura Motors had been finalized overnight, emails from executives of the new management, news alerts with headlines about his speech. Trump buys dealership to give a moral lesson. From business to luxury cars, Donald Trump's most powerful gesture. Aura Motors, the silent revolution begins in Dubai. He turned off the phone and put it back on the table. This wasn't about publicity or headlines. It was about Melania. A few hours later, the sun was high when Melania woke up. Donald had ordered a full breakfast served on the spacious suite's balcony. The aroma of fresh Arabic coffee and freshly baked croissants lingered in the air like an invitation. Melania appeared, wearing a navy blue silk robe, her hair tied in a makeshift bun that accentuated the natural elegance of her face. She smiled when she saw the table set, with fresh flowers in the center and the local newspaper carefully folded next to it. She sat in the white wicker chair and took a deep breath, absorbing the panoramic view of the city. There was something different in her gaze, a renewed confidence, a strength that seemed to have blossomed overnight. Donald came from behind and wrapped her in a gentle embrace, his strong arms crossing over her shoulders like a shield. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. She nodded, holding his wrists affectionately. "Better than in a long time," she replied, her voice clear, like someone who had finally found a safe harbor after a storm. Donald kissed the top of her head and sat in the chair next to her. For a few moments, they simply enjoyed the coffee in silence, as if they needed this time to process everything that had happened. The only sound was the delicate clink of porcelain cups and the distant hum of the city waking up below. Melania broke the silence, her gaze meeting his with a tenderness she had rarely shown publicly. "You didn't have to do that, but you did, and it was beautiful, Donald." He smiled, the kind of smile he rarely showed in front of the cameras. It wasn't the smile of the businessman or the politician. It was the smile of a man who fights for what he believes in. "I did it because you deserved it, and because it's high time some places learned what respect is." Her eyes filled with tears, reflecting the golden morning light like polished crystals. "When we first met, you told me, 'One day, I will protect you from the whole world.' Do you remember that?" Donald chuckled softly, taking her hand in his. The platinum ring shimmered in the sunlight. "I remember, and I'll spend the rest of my life fulfilling that promise." She gently squeezed his hand. In that touch, there was more than love. There was history. There was pain overcome. There was gratitude. But above all, there was a mutual pride that transcended words. The following days. They were a whirlwind of change. Aura Motors, once a temple of superficial exclusivity, underwent a transformation that went beyond appearances. The traditional red carpet at the entrance was replaced by an elegant corridor with framed photographs of ordinary people. An elderly taxi driver with deep wrinkles and wise eyes, a Filipino housemaid with a radiant smile, an African student carrying books, a woman in a delicately embroidered hijab. Beneath each image, in discreet golden letters, the same phrase: luxury is treating everyone with dignity. On the first morning after the reopening, Khaled arrived early. He was nervous. His new uniform, custom-made in a navy blue shade that resembled the night sky, had a different name tag: Humanized Service Manager. He could hardly believe it. Weeks ago, he was just a junior employee, silently witnessing daily injustices. Now he was called to Henri's office, who awaited him with documents on the table and a transformed expression. The former manager, once known for his rigidity and coldness, seemed to have found a new form of leadership. "Khaled," Henry said, standing to greet him, "by direct order of Mr. Trump, you've been promoted. Your behavior that day, the way you respected a client who wasn't recognized, that's what inspired the brand's new directive." Khaled felt a lump in his throat. He blinked rapidly to hold back the tears threatening to form. Years spent dedicating himself to a job where he felt invisible. And now, here he was, being recognized not for subservience, but for humanity. "Thank you," he managed to reply. I just did what I thought was right." Henri smiled and extended his hand in a solemn gesture. "And that's exactly what this store needs now." The story didn't take long to spread. An amateur video, recorded by one of the guests at the reveal night, captured the exact moment Donald stepped onto the stage and announced the purchase of Oram. The internet did the rest. In less than 48 hours, the video had been viewed over 30 million times, translated and subtitled in 20 different languages. The headlines varied but kept the same theme: the day Donald Trump bought a store to teach respect. The most expensive purchase for a price that has no value. With impressive speed, Oram Motors launched a global campaign titled "Elegance with Purpose." The new slogan appeared simultaneously in the windows of branches in Paris, New York, Johannesburg, and Tokyo, with words that summarized the philosophy: class is invisible, character is not. Meanwhile, Alexis, the saleswoman who had humiliated Melania, faced the consequences of her actions. Her social media profile was deactivated after a wave of criticism. No luxury brand or dealership wanted to associate their name with the scandal that went viral. The last news about her circulated that she had flown to a destination in Europe, seeking the anonymity she now desperately desired. 2 weeks after the incident, Melania and Donald returned to Sevnica. But something had changed in her. The experience had not only healed an old wound, but had awakened a purpose. Melania began giving interviews about silent discrimination, the kind that happens in whispers and glances, the kind that leaves no proof but hurts deeply. In less than a month, she had created the Naus Foundation, dedicated to supporting women who were victims of what she called elitist racism, discrimination disguised as exclusivity. Her name, once known primarily for her association with Donald, was now synonymous with a force that combined elegance and resilience. At an intimate dinner with close friends at their Sevnica home, while the sun set over the ocean, casting golden reflections that reminded her of that morning in Dubai, one of the guests asked the question many thought but few dared to vocalize. "Why did you do that, Donald? Buy an entire company for an act of arrogance?" Donald, pouring himself some red wine, answered without hesitation, with the same certainty that had made him sink impossible deals at decisive moments. "Because when you love someone, you don't let the world diminish them. You rewrite the rules, if necessary." And so, what began as a humiliation on an ordinary morning turned into a silent revolution that echoed in luxury halls around the world. An act of arrogance led to a change that transcended the personal and touched the universal. A woman who had been seen as invisible became the face of a deeper elegance, the kind the world urgently needed to recognize. As Melania said months later in her first official speech, as the global ambassador for the campaign born from that experience, true luxury is being seen, respected, and never silenced again. If this story touched you, please choose to share it widely. For those who care, open hearts can help shape a kinder realm where respect stands above hollow prestige. Embrace these words from Melania Trump. Let your best intentions make all the difference.